This episode is brought to you by DistroKid. DistroKid is the easiest way for musicians to get their music into all the platforms: Amazon, Apple, Tidal, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and more. Plus, you've got unlimited uploads, and the artist keeps 100% of what they make. But what I love most about DistroKid is their app. The design of it just makes the whole process so easy. Now you can be sure that you're doing everything you need to do to get your music out there. Go to distrokid.com to check it out or download the app now. The album comes out and Columbia releases 10 out of the 13 songs on singles. And there's not a DJ in the world who probably wasn't confused by that. All 5 records were also issued with picture sleeves showing the same album cover photo. So it's not even like they were differentiated with their covers. They all look the same, too. And then there's your coming out party. Columbia provided 700 bottles of wine with a Moby Grape label, but no corkscrews.
It's really frustrating.
The benefit of hindsight always casts that night as the night the good vibes went bad. But I'm sure it wasn't immediately apparent at that time. Are there any good memories from that night that you had?
Well, I think we had the ability to just screw things up all by ourselves, and we didn't need any help. But we got a lot of help.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the Music Obsessives podcast that gives freaks like you and me the chance to connect with the brotherhood obsessed with rating the entire discography of every single artist and band that ever mattered. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and with 4 new episodes each week, you're going to gain a comprehensive knowledge of an act's history and output in the time it takes to listen to one album. Each new guest swings a hard left into an area you either had no idea you needed to know about or know all about and can't believe you're not alone out there. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Moby Grape'S, along with 2 separately interviewed guests in a special doubleheader episode about those heady days of 1966 to early 68. Don Stevenson and Peterlewis of Moby Grape. Here's just a few of the many things that Don and Peter separately discuss with Discograffiti in part 1 of our conversations with each of them. How the band initially coalesced, the early days finding their sound at the Ark, how the major label feeding frenzy over the band wound up impacting them, Don's infamous front cover middle finger, an in-depth discussion of their legendary self-titled debut, the steep downhill slide that began literally on the night of their launch party, and the time Skip broke down crying in the studio when the reaction to his new song wasn't as he'd expected. Then, for good measure, Peter drops a bomb at the end of the whole thing. Heads up, the director's cut of this one runs a whopping 52 minutes longer. So if you're a Moby Grape superfan like me, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page. You can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. This episode is part of a series called Grape Expectations, a Rashomon-style overview of the band Moby Grape. Not only are they one of the all-time best, but there is no crazier story in the history of music than that of the Grape. It includes disastrous tours, lawsuits, police busts, horribly nefarious managers, a fake touring version of the band, mysterious black magic witches, drug-induced madness, insane asylums, and attempted murder with an axe. And no joke, that's just within the band's first 2 years. There will be separate interviews with all 3 living members of the band, Peterlewis, Don Stevenson, and Bob Mosley, plus an epic interview with band biographer Cam Cobb on the great Skipspence, and some surprise guests. The only way to hear the entirety of Grape Expectations is to visit patreon.com/discograffiti and subscribe at the major tier. If you don't want to subscribe, you can either click on the Collections tab and simply purchase the whole series, or even get them piecemeal. But the public episodes have been edited down for time, plus the Monday bonus episodes, which is half the series, aren't being aired publicly in full. So if you're a Grape fan, trust me, you'll want to get over to Patreon lickety-split. Coming up, we've got an interview with Lenny Waronker, Denny Tedesco on his incredible new documentary, The Immediate Family, an unprecedentedly intimate interview with Marilyn Wilson Rutherford and her cousin and Honey's bandmate Ginger Blake, plus Season 3 of the Beach Boys and Your Dreams Come True series, which will absolutely, without question, delve deeper into Pet Sounds and Smile than anyone else ever has in history. Plus, an incredibly special Graham Nash deep dive in which Graham himself rates and discusses everything he's ever released. That means solo, CSN, CSNY, Crosby and Nash, and for good measure, Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then! Today's guest is one of the founding members of Moby Grape, a band whose debut record is commonly considered one of the best, if not the all-time best, debut albums ever released. Also tied with Badfinger, theirs is the most tragic and harrowing story in rock history. I'm not sure what the odds are, but I'm guessing it's something of an astronomical long shot that two of its members, Bob Mosley and Skip Spence, wound up suffering from similarly severe diagnosable mental illnesses, and yet in the end, it's the music that makes it a story worth telling in the first place. He first found local recognition as a member of the Frantics, a Seattle-based band which also included the great Jerry Miller on guitar. That band relocated to San Francisco in 1966 and formed the nucleus of what became Moby Grape, a crucial component of San Francisco's psychedelic music scene during the period leading up to the Summer of Love. The Grape merged elements of rock and roll, folk music, pop, blues, country, and more, and were one of the first groups who could boast that all members were both vocalists and songwriters, and damn fine ones at that. In addition, while almost every band that came out of the Frisco scene were busy stretching out song lengths to ludicrously epic lengths, the Grape were all about tightness and concision. This man not only sang and drummed for him, but also co-wrote, typically in tandem with Jerry Miller, a number of classics for him too, including Hey Grandma, covered by The Move, 805, covered by Robert Plant, Someday, Ain't No Use, Changes, Going Nowhere, Treat Me Bad, Truly Fine Citizen, and Murder in My Heart for the Judge, which was covered by both Three Dog Night and Lee Michaels. He is the only member of Moby Grape to continue in music while concurrently developing occupational interests outside of it. He's become well known in real estate circles for the sale of timeshares in British Columbia, Canada, in a resort location where he maintains a residence. As of 2006, he was the national sales director of Club Intrawest, owned by the Intrawest Corporation. Possibly due to this full-roundedness as a human being, this man was, by 2010, the only member of the Grape not to have released a solo album. In 2010, he duly took care of that once and for all. And if there was any doubt that he could pull it off alone without erstwhile songwriting partner Jerry Miller by his side, one listen to the title track of King of the Fools will put those doubts firmly in your rear view. 2018 brought Buskin' in the Subway. Check out Dog on a Bone, Regret, and Do You Ever Think About Me for further doubts in the rear view action. And then there's Limited Engagement Volumes 1 and 2, which are just packed like a sardine can with great songs. Those two albums can be ordered at soundsweetrecords.com. That's Soundsweet, S-U-I-T-E, records.com. So go get them. He's making up for lost time, and we all know it's not supposed to work this way, but truly, the older he gets, the better he gets. As far as singing, songwriting, country rock drummers named Don, no joke, Don Henley is not the first one that comes to mind. In fact, he's actually a very distant second. Lads and ladies, been a long time this time round, it's Don Stevenson.
Wow. Hey, that's quite an introduction, David. Thanks.
I seriously mean every word of it. It is not supposed to work like that. And I honestly believe, and I've thought about this ad nauseum, that if you guys had had the success that looked like it was being handed to you on a silver platter back in 67, that you might not have worked so hard in maintaining the greatness, not just you, but all the members of the Grape, every time going to bat, that there's something to prove. And I guess that's a silver lining in the tale, right?
Yeah, we narrowly escaped fame and fortune.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I usually like to throw out what my connection is with the band before we delve into the history. And for me, this is not a quick and easy story because you guys have meant a lot to me for a long time. I lived in the Lower Haight in 1993, and there was a record store on the Haight called Revolution Records, and it was there that I first bought your debut album. I then went back and got Wow, Grape Jam, I got 69, I got Truly Fine Citizen, and I was a real convert. And at that time, there was an article by Johnny Angel in a Santa Cruz paper about Skippy. And I was putting a feature film together because I'm a filmmaker. And I was so taken by not just the music, but the tale, that I was making a movie actually about the second coming of Jesus called Jesus 2. And I remade the image of Jesus into what Skip looked like in 1994. So that's how nonstop I was thinking about you guys. And then in 95, 96, I wanted to make a documentary about you guys. I wound up hanging out backstage with you at Maritime Hall in 1996. Bob Mosley had just, I don't know if he rejoined the band or at least just played with you that night for the first time in a while. I smoked a bowl with you guys backstage, then cut to like 2008 or 9. I hung out with Peter at his house with a writer friend of mine, and we were going to write a book called Grape Expectations. This is before Cam came on the scene. So decades of love for you guys, decades of obsession for your music, obsession really for the spirit of a group of guys who, no matter how many odds are stacked against them, never give the fuck up. And that has informed me in my darkest hours. I think of the members of the Grape and what you had to go through and the fact that you never gave up. And as far as that It's a Wonderful Life thing of, I wonder if I've affected or touched people, I can tell you for sure you've changed my life in that way. Thank you. Let's introduce the characters in today's episode. If you happen to not know who Moby Grape is, then you're very lucky today to be introduced to a catalog that is very unique, very original, and expansive in its greatness. So we have Skip Spence on guitar and vocals, Jerry Miller on guitar and vocals, Don Stevenson, drums and vocals, Bob Mosley, bass and vocals, and peterlewis, guitar and vocals. You may have heard there that I mentioned 3 guitarists. So all 3 of you guys played lead at various points. Often you guys would play off each other. Would you guys call it crosstalk? Would you refer to your style? I know that basically, if I was to break it down, Jerry's the lead player, Peter's the finger picker, and Skip is the mystical one who floats through and on top of and underneath everything. If I was to generalize, right?
That's a description right there. That's the description.
Okay, so that style, that 3-guitar assault, besides you guys, we're only really looking at Buffalo Springfield. That's the only other band that I can think of that's comparable stylistically. In addition to the 3-guitar assault, you guys also featured an unprecedented amount of songwriters in the band, but you weren't just songwriters. All 5 of you were really good songwriters. So it's 5 guys bringing everything imaginable to the table. Songs, instrumental capability, energy, enthusiasm, you name it, all 5 of you guys had it. And the odds of that, because it's not like you knew each other beforehand, this was an assembled band. was kind of astronomical that it wound up working as well as it did, right?
And it's surprising to me is that none of the guys in the band ever got into another band that took off. You know what I mean? It's because you look at a lot of single individual pieces of early bands, and then this guy goes to here and this guy goes to here, and then this band becomes some, none of that. I mean, Jerry didn't go play with the Grateful Dead.
You guys are like the Mob. You can never actually leave the Mob.
No, that's right. Yeah, we were made guys.
Yeah, you are made guys.
And when we played for the Mob enough.
Here's a section of the show that I affectionately call the run-up, and it gets us with great economy to the first moment you spent together as a band. The tale actually begins with Alexander Spence, better known as Skip or Skippy, being hired as Jefferson Airplane's first drummer by Marty Balin in the late summer of '65, but not because he was a drummer, but rather because he looked like a drummer, which you got to love stories like that, because only in the 1960s did things like that happen. After the 60s, you weren't brought in a band because you looked like a drummer. Things like that stopped after the 60s. So already, directly from the outset, this whole thing plays like a fairy tale, almost like something of a cosmic accident. So Skip contributed a couple of really solid songs to the group: Blues from an Airplane, JPP McStep B Blues, which is a great unreleased song that was later released on the Airplane's early Flight record. Spence played on their first album, Jefferson Airplane Takes Off, as well as with an embryonic version of Quicksilver Messenger Service. Unfortunately, Skip wound up, or fortunately for the Grape, he wound up missing one too many of the Airplane's rehearsals, and both he and their shadowy, rather unsavory manager, Matthew Cates, were shown the door in May 1966, but not before Skippy tossed them a classic song, My Best Friend, which the group wisely placed on Surrealistic Pillow. And so Matthew Cates formed Moby Grape in September '66 in San Francisco, the idea being to build a whole new outfit around Skippy that mimicked the setup of the Airplane, with various strands of songwriting and vocal work by multiple group members, and with Cates, of course, as their manager. So the search began and the call went out. You and Jerry were both in the Frantics, which was based in Seattle, right?
Yep, we were in the Northwest.
So you had met Jerry Garcia in 1965, and he encouraged you guys to come to San Francisco. I don't know if that was the only reason why you moved to the Bay Area, but after that 1965 meeting, you did come down to San Francisco, right?
We came down to San Francisco because the Frantics had a gig on Broadway in San Francisco.
Okay, so you get a call from, is it Skip or is it Matthew?
I think Matthew called. Jerry and I were living together with this family. It was our family.
Do you remember that phone call? Do you remember what went down in that phone call?
Just that we were invited to an audition, that they were having auditions in San Francisco for a new rock band. And there was a lot of stuff going on in San Francisco at the time. So Matthew obviously had Skip. Matthew also kind of like really loved Janis Joplin too. He could see talent. Yeah, I think eventually he even wanted to start a band with Bob, just with Bob, featuring Bob. So I think the idea was to feature the band with Skip. I don't think he was planning on getting a band with 5 peers. Thought he was going to have a band of people that were going to kind of back up Skip, and that was going to be the deal. But we were called up to come and audition up in San Francisco and got the information. We knew that Skip was going to be involved and that he played with the Airplane.
Had you met Skip or Peter?
No.
Okay. So how did they know about you guys?
Well, they knew about Jerry and I from Bob, and then they knew about Bob from Peter. And I mean, that's the 6 degrees of separation.
Okay.
Actually, I had only found out a few years ago that very easily could have been pretty much the Joel Scott Hill trio could have been Moby Grape. It could have been Joel and Johnny Barbada and Bob, but they decided they didn't want to go to the audition, or if they went, they didn't like it or whatever. But I was going, hey, wait a second, man. There were some really good players that came up there and auditioned for that gig.
Tell me about the first time, if you remember, the 5 of you were in the same room, and if you felt that charge of this feels right, or did it take time?
Jerry and I went up to that audition. We were looking at optimistically, I guess, let's go up and do this thing. So when we got there, we went into where the audition was, and all the instruments were set up, amps were up, PA system was up.
Did you guys already have songs that wound up on that first album that you started playing?
We played our favorite rock and roll stuff, and like Great Balls of Fire and Chuck Berry, and you know, just started playing stuff. And then there would be some improvisation with some stuff that was new that people had started. Skip would play something that he was working on, and we'd all just kind of join in. So there was some songs that none of us had ever heard before, except for Skip, and I don't know if he had been up there with Peter for a while. But there's nothing that happened that didn't come off feeling like we've been playing together forever.
Okay.
Like seeing Jerry last in 2023 and not having seen him personally for a long time. The minute we saw each other was like we had never not seen each other. We took our conversation up right exactly where it was from before. It was interesting in that audition in San Francisco. We hadn't really been together before, but it had been like we'd been together before, and we just come back together and we picked up where we left off, except it was a fresh new start. And so it was a really interesting audition. And Jerry and I were both blown away, but Jerry and I wanted to be cool. And we didn't express our enthusiasm, did not express our excitement, underplayed the whole thing, you know, like, thanks for the audition. It was really good to see you guys, you know, really enjoyed this. Thanks, man. We'll check you out later. Have a good one, you know, bye. And then Jerry and I got in the car, and we're just overwhelmed. You know, we're going high-fiving each other and going, oh, my God, man, that's like so good. So it was like nothing I'd ever experienced. You know, I'll tell you what, man, my musical roots have had a lot of experiences with some very, very wonderful, interesting musicians and players, but never experienced anything like that audition. And that's what fueled where we were going to go from there. Because it never stopped, because that chemistry, introduction to new things, fitting in, it just took off from that moment.
Tell me about your impressions of Matthew Cates at the beginning.
I thought he was like the Pied Piper of San Francisco. He had a great game. And maybe he was. You know, maybe he was. Maybe it's just something happened. I mean, you get some barnacles on your shell, and you start to realize philosophically what works in this life and what doesn't work in this life. And some things even may appear to, but ultimately they don't. You know, ultimately you end up in rubble. So I think Matthew at first, to me, you know, he was like the Pied Piper. He had contact with Janis. He loved Janis. He had been managing the airplane. He had Skip. He had signed him as his agent and as his manager. What's not to like about this guy? He's kind of mysterious looking, very kind of like little goatee, and you know, he even wore a cape, you know. I mean, he was just, you know, he was
so no red flags from this guy at the beginning.
No, man, because I mean, first off, I was paying more attention to Skip and to Bob and to Peter than I was to Matthew. But Matthew he talked to us and ultimately and convinced us that he had our best interest at heart, and somewhere, and I think he did, you know. Somewhere down the line, money became more important than the music.
Initially, I know he's paying for your apartments, he's paying for your living costs, so he kind of becomes absolutely crucial to you guys. And then the contracts come out, and from what I understand, obviously you had no legal advice at the time because he was the guy who was, you know, he's paving the way for you guys. So when he produced the contracts for you guys to sign, was there a vibe, or did he express outright that there'd be no further financial support unless you guys signed with him?
No, this was good, Matt. This was good, Matthew.
Yeah.
This was, like you said, it was Matthew who was our provider for our families and for our, you know, all our needs. And we were just told to play and to practice and to create music, and he was going to take care of everything else.
Yeah.
I guess when you're young, you know, just in your early 20s, that those things, you know, you kind of like take for granted at face value that if he's taking care of you up to this point, he's going to continue to take care of you. And that's what he said. I need to have the power here to be able to go in to talk to the various record companies and to be able to negotiate for you guys and to pull this off. So I need to get an okay here on this, you know. And so Jerry was actually skeptical, you know, but I didn't pay attention to him. You have to imagine, we were over at the Ark, and there was all of these bands playing up in San Francisco that were getting record record contracts, and their music was starting to get exposure. And so there was like a lot of excitement built around the fact that there was going to be a future for us as a band, that we were going to be able to make music and to be able to tour and to play and to, create something really cool. So whatever skepticism there was overcome by, the major thought of the group was like, this is very exciting, and we can trust Matthew.
So what Don just referenced, the Ark, during September and October of 66, you guys were rehearsing daily, 8 hours at a clip at the Ark, which was a big old paddle boat turned club in Sausalito. And very quickly, you guys became definitely the tightest and probably the most talked about band in the area, right?
Yeah, I think we were an after-hours club. So people would be over at the Fillmore in the Avalon listening to the Airplane and to the Dead and Quicksilver, and all those bands were over there. And then they come over to the Ark, and it was Janis Joplin with Big Brother and the Holding Company and Lee Michaels and Buffalo Springfield and Moby Grape. And nobody knew who any of us were at the time. And so then people would come over after those gigs over there, and we'd play till dawn, till the morning.
Yeah.
Have breakfast and go home, go to bed, and then come back in the afternoon and start practicing.
Also, how genius, whether or not it was intentional for this to be the case, but, in a scene that prized incredibly epic song lengths that went on forever, I can think of no other band except for you guys and the Beau Brummels, who prized concision over epic exploratory, Dark Magic was your repository for, loosening your belt and exploring, right? But otherwise, it was about songcraft, and you guys were tight. I don't know if it was on purpose to stand out, but that is genius.
It was on purpose. You don't want to bore people. It was like, if you can't say it in 3 minutes, then, something wrong.
Right.
Just say what you have to say and don't go past the close.
So were you bored by a lot of the acts at the time who would just play ad infinitum?
Yeah. Actually.
Yeah.
But I loved, like, Taj Mahal would play. So I thought that a lot of that was not necessary. Okay, so you can do that, but you're not Oscar Peterson.
In October 66, you're not yet with Columbia, but CBS offers a contract to Moby Grape. And that's the point where Cates coerced the band into giving up ownership of the name and the publishing rights. Either that or he would block you from signing with the label. And that decision wound up, in later years, you guys have performed under the name The Melvilles, Mosley Grape, Fine Wine, Legendary Grape, and my favorite, Moby Grape. That obviously became that decision. And obviously, if, Cates is running the show, and, if I was in your shoes, I would have done the same thing, not thinking that it would present any repercussions. But I guess that happened in October of 66.
Yeah.
So phase one, this is 1967, obscenely good vibes. Record companies came sniffing around in droves. You had Atlantic wanting to sign you. You had Elektra's Paul Rothchild actually wound up cutting a demo acetate with the band. And then Columbia's David Rubinson. Were there others that you remember?
Those are the three major ones.
Yeah. So those guys were all serious about it. You must have been just shitting your pants with excitement. I would have been not able to sleep. I would have been so excited.
It was a bit of a whirlwind, It was pretty exciting. Because like I said, we were like having a lot of fun blowing people away.
By the way, the bidding war was no hype. I mean, Jack Holtzman from Elektra apparently offered David Rubinson a job at Elektra if he simply brought Moby Grape with him.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. How cool is that? I mean, that's cool. How powerful your music is. All you got to do is bring Moby Grape and you got yourself a job. That's it. So, okay, June 6th, 1967, the Moby Grape debut comes out. Production on the record ran from March 11th to April 25th, 1967, but like back and forth, like you guys were gigging through this whole time, and it was for a cost of $11,000. And then Rounder was also recorded. That was, I think, the only outtake from those sessions, but no lyrics or vocals were completed for it at the time. And by the way, just to let you know, I only listened to the versions of these tracks that were on the vintage collection because all of the stuff that Rubinson is saying from the control room, when he's talking with you, boom, taka, boom, taka.
That was before Fall on You.
Fall on You, yeah. To me, I think part of the spirit of the music is in some of that talk talk back stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really good because that made me angry.
Did it really?
So, yeah. Because I'm playing it, and I'm playing it right. I'm playing it good. What are you talking about? And so then he does that and goes boom, baka,
Yeah.
And I'm going, man, I just got angry, and I did exactly what I should have done. But he was a pretty good coach,
and he was using like hip terminology. Boom, taka. That's where it's at, man. That's where it's at.
Yeah. That's it.
And he was also taunting Skippy, saying, maybe I should be a rock and roll star. Cut off my mustache, and you hear Skippy going, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. So that whole first album was, like I said, we just went in, laid the tracks down. There wasn't too much of take 75. It was pretty much first takes, first few takes, just laid it down, went in, same thing with the vocals.
What's the setup? Are you looking each other in the eyes, but you have baffles? What's the setup like in there?
No, we were baffled. I've been baffled most of my life. So I enjoy playing guitar and writing music. I get out from the back and get to sit up front and hang out with the people,
I've heard you talking about the way that you recorded back then, which accounts for the type of performances that you were able to deliver on the record.
Yeah.
Right? So what was it about the setup of that first album? Because there isn't a single list. If somebody publishes a list of the best debut albums of all time and Moby Grape isn't on it, that list is laughable.
Maybe we were thinking of like when we played our gig in Philadelphia, where we were all looking at each other in the face for the first time on a round stage, where the music soared live really in a wonderful way. But the first album, again, if you walk into the studio and you're prepared and you know what you're doing and you love what you're doing and you're really enthusiastic and excited about it, that was a description of Moby Grape in that first album. And in the body of the studio, everybody could see each other, And when we were singing, we were all singing on the same mic,
Oh, that's one mic, really?
Yeah, well, on some of we were just singing all on the same mic.
Wow. As far as the songwriting goes, it's basically Bob wrote alone, Peter wrote alone, Skip wrote alone, and then you and Jerry wrote together. What I love about your setup, even though Kate's wound up having a terrifying ego, the egolessness of you guys with regard to, like, for example, Peter deploying that insanely beautiful intro for 805, he wasn't looking for credit. He was just trying to make your song better. It was your song still. You didn't have to just credit everything to Moby Grape in order to stop the arguments. You guys came in with your songs, and everybody just tried to egolessly make them all better.
Yeah, that's a good example. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's really nice. So let's talk about that awesome cover photograph and the most notorious middle finger of all time.
If I knew that would have happened, I would have planned it. But I didn't plan it. I just gave the finger on almost every shot. Or a lot of the shots that we did, I was giving the finger. Probably had a lot to do with, the day and the time and the time that we lived in. And some of it had to do with Marshall.
Jim Marshall, by the way.
Jim Marshall, yeah. He was dragging us from pillar to post. I was just, getting fed up with one shot after another to another location, to doing something different, to stand this way and you go over there. And, so pretty soon I was just giving the bird, giving the finger on the whole thing.
And not only that, but I've looked at your face a great number of times on that album cover. You look pissed. I mean, you look like you're like growling, actually. And then the most amazing thing is Columbia went to town modifying that record, the cover that is. They not only airbrushed your finger out, but they thought, due to the political climate at the time, that the U.S. flag behind Skip was going to be, for whatever reason, controversial. So they colored it red, which is so weird to me, because isn't that more controversial to intimate communism? I don't understand the ideology behind doing that. And then when the cover was again revised, the flag was changed from red to black. So, I mean, they went to town modifying that album cover.
That was just the tip of the iceberg.
Please tell. Please do tell.
When it left the purity of the band, what we were doing together, and you get over into the business side, there was some mistakes made. that was one of them,
Right.
First off, just not hanging in there. I mean, this is rock and roll, man. If somebody's giving the finger, that was an expression of the times.
Yeah.
That there was a lot going on that you could say that to.
But that's another thing about you guys is like you're entering the summer of love, and here's the album of the summer of love. I mean, to me, it's as good as Sgt. Pepper, and you're right there with your middle finger. So again, it's like, San Francisco, epic song lengths, here comes this super concise band. And then Summer of Love, everyone's putting daisies and gun barrels, and you're there giving the finger. I love it. Yeah. I love it.
Some A&R guys back in New York going, what we got here? We got a band. I'm telling you, I love this band, this Moby Grape band. There's no band like this band. This is going to be the American Beatles, I'm telling you. Have you heard the music on this band? This band is going to be the best band we've ever had. I got an idea. Tell me what you think. Here's what we're going to do. We're not going to do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. We're going to release 5 singles at the same time. This is going to be coverage like you've never heard before. It's going to explode like nothing else. This is going to be so sensational. We're going to put a little packet together. We're going to send them out to radio stations. 5 singles, 5 at the same time. It's going to be the biggest thing ever. This is going to be great. You watch. What do you think, guys? Hey, we love it. Let's do that.
Let me ask you a question, because I want to talk about that more in depth after we talk about the tracks on the record. When did you hear about that?
About the 5 singles?
Yeah.
It kind of like came along with the
party?
With our launch, and yeah.
Before we get to where the banana peel wilts a little bit, I want to talk about, because we're riding a crest right now. So the album comes out 11 days after Sgt. Pepper. It peaks at number 24 on the Billboard chart, which is actually really good, in September, and remains on the chart for half a year. For a first album, that is not bad, man. And in 2003, the album was ranked number 121 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. Honestly, it belongs even higher. And it was voted number 98 in Colin Larkin's all-time top 1,000 albums. It was also included in Robert Christgau's basic record library of 1950s and 1960s recordings, which was published in his book, Rock Albums of the 70s. It's on every list. Let's just settle for that. It's on every list that's known to mankind. Anyone who knows anything about music, if it's not on your list, then you just haven't heard it yet. So before we talk about the actual album, I need for you to solve a puzzle for me first. Let's talk first about Dark Magic and when you decided to abandon that tune for inclusion on this album. Was that ever in the running for something you would do on this?
Dark Magic was pretty much written on stage.
But did you ever think of doing a studio version, or was that never?
No.
Okay. All right, let's drop the needle on this bad boy, because I can't wait. So, okay, we start the record. Moby Grape begins with a Miller Stevenson classic, Hey Grandma. So, I mean, I know it's about the granny dresses of the hate. So, Were you into those kinds of girls who were wearing those granny dresses?
Are you kidding?
They're still wearing them down there. I mean, I lived there in 93. They were still wearing the granny dresses.
I know. I was down there in 93, too. And you'd see, Volkswagen buses zipping up and through the Santa Cruz Mountains, and granny dresses and patchouli oil. And yeah, it was very seductive. It was very much in the air. It was lovely. Beautiful young ladies with cotton dresses that didn't show anything, but showed everything.
Right.
In a discreet, beautifully sexual way. It was really, it was quite, like I said, it was in the air. And along with that came the smell of patchouli oil and the flowers in their hair, which were really happening. That was, Hey Grandma, and that was it, because they were wearing those granny dresses.
I mean, this is a perfect song. It's a great rock and roll song. It's a perfect opener for an album, because immediately you're indoctrinated with this locomotive chug-a-lug song that kind of has this Creedence vibe, but it's harder than Creedence. And Creedence really weren't as big a thing yet. I mean, this was incendiary rock and roll. No bullshit, too. It just gets right into it immediately. You know where you are, you know the kind of band that you're listening to, and it's really an incredible introduction to the group.
It came out of, I think Jerry and I brought the shuffle to Moby Grape, and Mosley played with us. We played a lot of shuffles and the Frantics, but the Pacific Northwest and played a lot of blues and stuff up there. And so the shuffle is just our favorite thing. Jerry and I love to shuffle. Yeah. And so Hey Grandma was just kind of like a blues shuffle, but it was rock, but it still had that funky blues feel to it.
The energy of this, even for a young man to have, the energy was just irrepressible, really. How would you typically write with Jerry? What would be the process for you guys to somehow come up with Hey Grandma?
Neil, his wife would cook up some French toast, smoke a binky, and sit down and start playing music.
So would it come out of jamming that you guys would write?
Yeah, it would just come out of sitting around together playing. I played cowboy chords at the time. Like I said, I play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player. But I've taken some lessons and learned some things. But yeah, Jerry would always just put up with me, and we'd start playing, and then we'd just start, we'd sit there and maybe we would get stoned, maybe we wouldn't, but we would play, and it just kind of evolved. I can't explain it other than the fact that he'd say, hey man, what about Hey Grandma? What about all these nice, beautiful ladies walking around here with these, just this great look, and you've got those grandma dresses, and then it would just start a conversation. Well, what if we went, Hey Grandma, you're so young, and then he would start playing or shuffle, and I'd go, Hey Grandma, you're so young, your old man is just a boy, and then he would change the chord, and he'd go, hey, what about this and what about that, and then the second verse was about the San Francisco scene, and then the last one was just ridiculous, about Robitussin. Everybody was doing everything to get stoned. Nobody was doing Robitussin and elderberry wine. And we thought, hey,
I love that line.
People can talk about smoking banana peels. We can talk about Robitussin and elderberry wine. So yeah, Jerry and I just had a chemistry.
I didn't realize that. So Robitussin and elderberry wine is your way of entering into the banana peel smoking craze, like the next step beyond that?
It was humor. It was a joke. Awesome. We wrote some funny songs, but that was just a joke on people would do anything to get stoned,
I love it. I'll never hear the song the same way again. I love that line even better now. All right, so track 2, Mr. Blues, as far as Bob Mosley goes, this is probably my favorite showcase ever for his voice. Also, your drums on this are outstanding, man.
Mosley, when he brought Mr. Blues to the group, it was just a joy. I mean, the dude is Mr. Blues.
Yeah.
There's nobody that sings blues any better than Mosley does.
What a song. In my notes here, I wrote that his voice is a wild howl that flings itself against the cage of the song. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I can go along with that.
Then Fall on You. And we're just twisting the kaleidoscope. Now we're on Peter. It's incredible to believe that this is 1 minute 53 seconds. You guys are not fucking around. So again, with the boom taka, that amphetamized gospel rock ecstasy, and the most surging, charging melodic bedrock, this song is pure ecstasy. Even though lyrically it's a downer, the actual music behind it is so ludicrously ecstatic, and the way that it plays against that is just sheer brilliance.
Yeah, the lyrics are, like I said, they're kind of a downer, but they're really great lyrics. Really great lyrics.
Incredible, yeah.
And it's 1 minute 53 seconds, but it's memorable, because there's not a flaw in it. Yeah. And the way it moves into Jerry's solo and just the guitar playing and, again, the background vocals. So it rocks. Peter rocks. Yeah. That was an awesome song. I play it now, still just like I do it just as a solo when I go play places. I love playing that song. I do it like more country now.
Well, Peter does rock, but a lot of his stuff, if you were to characterize him, it would be in a folkier type of direction. He doesn't typically go all out like this as much.
Yeah, he had more of a folk influence and kind of country, but this one just tore it up.
Yeah. I want to thank David Rubinson, wherever the hell you are, for getting on Don's bad side that day, because
no kidding,
he assisted in squeezing out one of the great drum tracks of all time. Amazing. Really, really great work, Don.
Oh, thanks.
And then another Miller Stevenson classic. This is probably the most covered song. Well, actually, what is the most covered song from this record? Is it 805?
Maybe.
Yeah. So you and Jerry are driving across the Golden Gate Bridge, and you come up with either this song or the idea for the song, and one of you asked the clerk at the toll gate what time it was to mark the occasion?
Yeah, I think that somehow the time of crossing the bridge came up. Kind of what I remembered and what Jerry remembered are pretty much the same thing, but they're a little different. So I don't know exactly what happened. But I do know that we were crossing the bridge and there was a, what time is it? And it's 8:05. And then we just started thinking about our wives and family and, stuff back up home. And the words started to come out,
Was the whole song written while you were driving, or did it?
Some of it was. Some of it kind of like, it's funny when you decide that there's something, there's a song and there's a seed. It hasn't been planted yet, but there's still the entire plant is contained in that seed. Yeah. So the seed was the words 8:05. And the thought that we were going to California and that we didn't know if our women were going to be with us or not with us there was just this whole thing. It was kind of like we're out here and we don't know what's going to happen. But the seed was in 8:05. The whole song was completely done. It just hadn't been written yet.
Right. When you are able to lock in creatively to the moment that you're in, when you're able to connect with that spirit of creativity, like you let the song write itself, and you're asking the toll clerk for the time, which then kicks off a flurry of thoughts and notions about your significant others. Being locked in with the now, it seemed like that's, at least at that time, what was going on with you guys. That's why you make it look so effortless, the creativity.
Yeah, again, you mentioned it already, and it's worth mentioning one more time. The introduction to that song that Peter wrote is a perfect example of the cooperation that we had as a group. Nobody worried about who was going to get credit for what. We brought that song. You listen to the vocals on that song, and we didn't create the harmonies and the vocals and the different parts. Those were created by us as a group. Jerry and I came in with the basic song and maybe some ideas of counterpoints, but those things just, they happened.
Yeah. And that intro is not easy. And again, with the Rubinson track, the pre-song talk on the Vintage compilation, Peter's trying it and he's messing it up. And then, the take comes and, oh my God, it's just perfect. It's just this piece of sparkling beauty that will live forever. That intro is astounding, and it's part of your song. It's his and it's yours, but it's this is one for the ages.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.
And then Come in the Morning, which is really a rare up song from Bob, for a song that Bob writes to have a spoken word section saying, come on, people, we're going to tell you about good dreams and things to make you happy. It always honestly makes me think about the whole history of the band, because you guys are standing here at the outset, not knowing, of course, what's around the bend, but it makes me think of Moby Grape's entire story, hearing this song.
Well, once again, the Four Tops had to come into play, because most of these songs just makes you want to sing. And it's a very positive song, really great energy. So, I love that song.
So good.
Those things that are in that pocket, it's not exactly Mr. Blues because it's not the same, but it's in this kind of the pocket.
Yeah.
And I really like playing that.
And then Omaha, which in a lot of ways, even though people don't dare cover it as much because it's so unique, in a lot of ways, it's kind of your signature song. This is a Skipspence composition that was called for the longest time, and for the most obvious of reasons, Listen, My Friends. And then when the people at Columbia asked him what the title of it was so they could put it on the album cover, he just said Omaha. You just got to love that guy. I mean, again, that spirit of pure creativity informs everything. It has nothing to do with Omaha. And this actually wound up charting. This reached number 88. And also for me, this is the apex of the five of you being able to capture that certain ineffable quality that was specific only to the grape.
Yeah, Omaha is brilliant. I can't believe that, guys who are doing radio shows don't use the intro to Omaha as an intro into the radio show. Because first off, David had that echo thing going back and forth, which is really cool. But then those guitar licks come in, and you just know something's going to happen here. That song got us kicked off a tour. I mean, that song is so powerful that, that the mamas and papas didn't want to come out and sing after we played it, because it was just an explosion. And Skip had that kind of explosive creativity and energy going for him, and so again, you look at the work and the guitars all working together. Nobody's getting in anybody's way, and it's just like it's relentless. That song is relentless.
Paul Williams from Crawdaddy, the creator of Crawdaddy, he described Omaha as one of the finest recorded examples of the wall of sound approach in rock. It surges and roars like a tidal wave restrained by a seawall.
Way to go, Paul.
This is truly one of the finest songs of all time. A great many times, if I was tired or something, I would blast this and just fling myself dancing around the room. And by the end of it, it acts just like a cup of coffee. Even better, usually.
That's right.
And then, of course, Naked If I Want To. Talk to me about Jerry Miller's Naked If I Want To.
That was written when we were in San Francisco, obviously, but it was on acid at the time. And it just seemed like it might make sense if we wanted to walk down the street naked if I want to. Wouldn't that be okay? I mean, really. And Jerry's got a great kind of a laid-back sense of humor, and so it's pretty funny, I'll pay you before I die, and can I buy this amplifier on time? I think at the time it was the shortest recorded song on an album.
55 seconds.
55 seconds.
Yeah. I love that this came out of an acid trip.
Yeah.
Was that something that you guys did a lot together? Did you guys trip a lot together?
We didn't do a lot, but we did some. We did some. We had some great experiments. I remember Jerry and I can't paint when it comes to drawing or being able to take spatial things and put them on paper and look at it. I'm lost, But Jerry could do that. He can paint. He really had a kind of a gift. And I remember we got really loaded on acid one time, and we ended up painting. We did a mutual painting together with watercolors, and it evolved. It went from like a landscape to mountains to to the sunshine to some kind of, and it ended up with we called it prehistoric duck. It ended up as a big duck. It was really funny, as a big black duck. And we, on that time, we also had a mirror. We found a mirror that was broken, and we took the pieces very carefully off the street and put them in a bag. We're still on acid, and we found a broken mirror. And we put pieces outside our house, where we were living. And then we'd have one piece that shot a beam into the living room, and then we'd take that piece from the living room and shoot that beam into the kitchen, and we'd take that beam and shoot it into the hallway, and then we'd take that beam. So we had this like laser beam going all through our house. That was like a really interesting thing to do. And then we ended up, at Denny's at 10 o'clock in the morning watching people go to church.
I'll never forget stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, those are just acid trips. The stuff was pretty good back then. I mean, it was pretty pure, so I never really did have a bad trip. I didn't take too many of them, but I never had a really bad one.
You're lucky. I've had a couple of bad ones, and I can't say I didn't learn anything from them. They just weren't as pleasurable as the good ones. I'm kind of curious, though, when you mentioned the duck, did that inform Skip's funky tonk? Because that always sounded like a duck singing that to me.
Oh, yeah, No, I don't think Skip had any influence from our prehistoric duck. Okay. But again, Skip, it was a pretty funny guy, Funky Tonk he just wanted it to sound like Albert with the Chipmunks.
Yeah,
he kind of like Funky Tonk is like he just wanted to sound like the Chipmunks.
All right, so we're flipping the debut over. That's a perfect album side, and we're about to go to another perfect album side. We put the needle down on side 2. And we have, I believe, the only song ever written by Skip, you, and Jerry, right? Someday is one of my favorite songs of all time. Again, the lead-in from the Vintage comp with David talking with Skippy about, I'm going to grow my hair out and be a rock star too. Maybe then I won't talk with my mother or something. And Skip is just, you can tell, he's not really responding, and his head is in the music. And he's not really responding to David. And I've heard that so many times. And then you could hear, I think it's Skip, counting off 3, 4, and then the gentle sway of that opening guitar. I got chills just talking about it just now. This is a perfect song. Can you please talk to me about Someday?
Well, Someday, it was written in the studio. It was finished in the studio anyway. And it's a relatively complicated song. It's complicated enough that when we got back together in Tacoma in 2013 or something like that, but there was a little reunion. Peter came up and we were going to play Someday, but we couldn't remember the chords, couldn't figure it out.
Wow.
So it was pretty intricate. And That's the one where famously Skip and I, in the studio, took probably an hour of rehearsal. We'd already rehearsed it to where we knew it really well, but we decided that we were going to sing it together rather than just me sing it or just Skip sing it. And what we wanted to do was to show that the two of us could sing together and be one voice.
Right.
So we matched each other, how we breathed, our facial expressions, the intensity that we had, and we just sat there and sang it back and forth until we could go into the studio and then sing it just as, so you couldn't tell if it was him or if it was me. It was us. And then Mosley comes in like, excuse me? It's just Caruso just... Where did he come from? It's just like this force of Mario Lanza blasting in the center of it. So anyway, it's it's a beautiful song.
It's really special. So Ain't No Use, which is just perfect honky-tonk style country pop, all in the space of 1:37 and probably comes closest to what the Buffalo Springfield were doing, but not sounding anything like them, just in a similar turf. The rest of the record is doing a whole other thing entirely. Those guys couldn't rock as hard as you, but Ain't No Use is just a perfect Miller Stevenson construct.
No, it's just a good country song.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this was a fun song to play live. It was just a fun song. Not exactly a throwaway, but it was like, if it don't have that swing, it don't mean a thing. And it had that little groove going for it,
It really did.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Mostly just played bass on it like crazy.
Yeah, as always. And then Sitting by the Window, Peter, I mean, he really outdid himself here. And I know that was about his marriage at the time, which it sounded like it was potentially a turbulent marriage, which I'll talk with him about when I speak with him. But man, he got some great songs out of it, at least. On the first 3 albums, he has songs all over the place about that marriage. And this is a particularly powerful one.
Yeah. Again, my comment on that is that I can't believe the intricacy of the tapestry that was woven by the 3 guitars.
Yeah.
The song is cool, and Peter's songwriting is always something I had admired.
Yeah.
And it's heartfelt, beautiful song, and well sang and all that. But the guitar part's just like, whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a contender for my favorite song that Peter ever wrote. It might be He as well, but this one is just, there's a mood to it that is all its own. And also, I always saw, in terms of the construction of the album, I always visualized Changes, Lazy Me, and Indifference. They're like a group. Those 3 songs operate together. And I feel like Sitting by the Window is the end of the first part of the album, and then these 3 other songs come. It's like you're washed up on this beach of melancholy before these 3 really powerful rockers come charging in.
That's a good description of it. It's very melancholy. People loved hearing it. And again, I always think of live performances, and when we played it live, it sounded good,
Yeah.
It was a great song to play live.
And then another classic that you had a hand in, Changes, which is really long for you guys at 3:21.
No, out of control.
Yeah. Man, it's almost like a gospel song that becomes a raga at the end. Who is singing here?
Me.
This is you? What a vocal, man. Jesus Christ. This is just such a charging song. You would sing while you were playing drums live?
Yeah, sing and play drums. Yeah, couldn't get anybody else to sing it, so I sang it while I played drums. Yeah.
Did you love playing this live?
Yeah, I did. I think my favorite part of that is the release into the guitar solo.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the live with the Fillmore, people just start screaming when Jerry comes into that guitar solo.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of energy. It's a really high energy song.
This whole last part of the record, it just like shoots you out the backside of the record. So Lazy Me, which is another real quick one, that's 1:45. That one, it's another great Mosley song. And I always connect with that lyric, I'll just lay here and decay here. That's a really profound thing for a kid of that age to be singing about.
I know. It's one of those things like I spoke earlier. It's like, that scared me. What are you doing, Mose?
Did he show signs of depression in 67?
No, he was just, no.
No?
I didn't see any signs of depression. No. I could see signs of the Marine, mostly. He was always like, he was like a jock, kind of surfer, popular, strong, confident guy, particularly during this whole period of time.
Well, Lazy Me is that is a great song. And honestly, my relationship with that song has taken a spin over the years because, especially coming in between Changes and Indifference, I didn't notice it as much. And then over time, I feel like it comes more front and center to me.
Yeah, it's hidden in there,
It kind of
almost between Sitting by the Window and Indifference.
And then Indifference, another Skippy classic, and it gets so intense at the end. During the final minute, when that one-note bass run threads the needle out into the distance and the tune runs its course, and then those final few notes, it almost feels like the tossed-off ending of a cartoon. It almost feels like a, that's all, folks, kind of a thing to me. Do-do-do-do-do-do, ba-doo.
Right.
I love that ending.
Yeah.
The way that the album goes out is pure magnificence.
Again, that's a shuffle, but it has nothing to do with like a traditional blues song. It's just Skippy's, imagination. And it's just a profound song. What a difference a day has made.
Yeah.
And more of the same. And then it goes into that, completely changes time signatures and beats and all that. We could have done better on figuring out endings for songs. It kind of hangs out there a little bit, but it's okay.
I'm sorry, but I have to disagree with you there. The ending of this song is incredible. The way that it kind of becomes, again, like almost like a raga, because Mosley's got that one-note bass run that leads the charge. I love it so much. It's very, very intense to me. And then the way that it goes out, it's like you don't want to make this great, bold statement. So there's a few extra songs that are put at the end of the CD reissue. You have Rounder, which we talked about, which is a classic. The audition recording of Looper and Indifference. The early version of Bitter Wind. Sweet Ride, Never Again, which is the long version of the Sweet Ride soundtrack theme song. And that's it. So here's my little capsule review of the record. There aren't many perfect debut albums in music history, but this is maybe the very first one. It features so many different types of songs on it. It's cocksure and excited and full of youth, promise, and imagination, plus a barely contained exhilaration at what the road ahead surely promises. And with what we know with the benefit of hindsight, the music actually gains more power with the contrasting shades of expectation and reality. This is a game changer that lay expectantly in wait for music lovers to discover it and hold it closely to their chest. Because although you won't find thousands of people in your life who know of it, the people you do bump into who know it, they'll know it well, and they'll never ever run out of praise for it. It looms large and is a major record to stumble across in one's musical education. I give this a very hard 5 stars.
Thanks for the review.
No problem, man. What do you give this one?
I've always been taught not to toot your own horn because it doesn't mean that much. But I think I'd have to give it a 5-star.
Yeah, anything but 5 is ludicrous for this album.
Yeah.
So directly after the release of the record, things go downhill. And when I say directly, I mean like almost immediately, right? Jeff Tamarkin has said the Grape saga is one of squandered potential, absurdly misguided decisions, bad luck, blunders, and excruciating heartbreak, all set to the tune of some of the greatest rock and roll ever to emerge from San Francisco. I think the best ever. Moby Grape could have had it all, but they ended up with nothing and less. Right out of the gate, speaking of fall on you, here's all the problems that started falling on you. Legal nightmares, police busts, stolen equipment, disastrous road and recording experiences, drug-induced madness, which we'll get to, but first I want to talk about hype. Let's talk about Purple Balloons. Let's talk about the launch party and the 5 singles at once. Understandably, Columbia is so psyched that, like your boardroom impression, which is a great impression, and which probably word for word actually went down exactly as you said it. On June 6th, 1967, the album comes out and Columbia releases 10 out of the 13 songs on singles. And there's not a DJ in the world who probably wasn't confused by that. But it came out of probably just pure unadulterated excitement, which is awesome to have the company at your back. So first there's that. You have Fall on You backed with Changes, Sitting by the Window backed with Indifference, 805 backed with Mr. Blues, Omaha backed with Someday, and Hey Grandma backed with Come in the Morning. Of those 5, people don't talk about it a lot, but Omaha and Hey Grandma actually charted. All 5 records were also issued with picture sleeves showing the same album cover photo. So it's not even like they were differentiated with their covers. They all looked the same too. And then there's Your Coming Out Party, the same exact day that the singles came out. Where at the Avalon Ballroom was Columbia's record release party for the Grape. All the guests received purple velvet press kits with the 5 singles and cute pictures of each grape. 10,000 purple orchids floated down from the ceiling. Unfortunately, once they were on the floor, the petals were slippery and had people falling down all night. Do you remember that as a thing?
Yeah, that was the thing.
And then Columbia provided 700 bottles of wine with a Moby Grape label, but no corkscrews.
It's really frustrating.
So the benefit of hindsight always casts that night as the night the good vibes went bad. But I'm sure it wasn't immediately apparent at that time, as it rarely is in cases like that. Are there any good memories from that night that you had?
Well, I think we had the ability to just screw things up all by ourselves, and we didn't need any help. But we got a lot of help.
When you were at that party, did it feel like, oh, this is weird? Or did it feel like, man, this is exciting? And then in retrospect, it felt like, oh, yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
We played an amazing set. As I recall, we played our ass off. And that's basically what I remember is going from the dressing room, getting ready, just so excited. It's our lunch and everybody's out there, executives from every company, from Columbia and all of these people who kind of have your back and have put all this work into this launch, and they had these little kits that they put together with a fuzzy purple, Moby Grape on the front and all these pictures inside. And they were handing those out to people and sending them off to radio stations, and they were at all 5. I mean, it was pretty darn exciting. Yeah. And we came out and we played our ass off. And that's all I remember the petals falling down from the ceiling and all that. I don't really recall the wine. I didn't have any wine, so, but I went from the stage back into the dressing room and then got back in, and we were excited and we stoked out and talking with some of the people that were on the venue and then I took off and went home.
So this was a legitimate record company excitement, but the issue was in San Francisco at that time, more so San Francisco, not as much LA. If there was hype, there was like a sniff of something in the air that hippies couldn't get with. Because, like I said, this is legitimate excitement. This is not quote unquote hype. This is, holy shit, you guys are the American Beatles. Like you literally are what the corollary would be to something like that. And in their excitement, they didn't bank on the fact that these Summer of Love, Hate Street hippies are going to sniff something disingenuous in the air, that the record company is trying to push something on us, which of course was not the intention. All the orchids and the bottles of wine and...
you can call it hype. I just call it marketing.
Right.
These guys were doing the very best they possibly could to launch this new act. They were behind it 100%, knowing that this was something that could be really explosive and really great for their label and be able to present this music to the public. And, so there was some really good people. I met a number of A&R people from Columbia that were really aficionados of not only our music, but the music that came before us and could carry on a conversation about how much they loved what they were doing and how much they wanted to, support this band and support this music and make something happen. So I think the intentions were good. The reason it became a hype is because the idea of the 5 records at one time, although it was born out of what somebody saw was probably pure genius at the time, just actually was a terrible mistake. But it wasn't a hype. It just ended up, people do that. They'll say, oh, these guys are, this is the Monkees.
Right, right.
Who knows what these guys are.
That's probably how it was interpreted when, of course, I agree with you 100%. The intention was incredibly pure, but the way that it was interpreted was like what you're saying. And then, of course, later on that night, in the early hours of June 7th, after the set, of course, it did not help that Jerry, Peter, and Skip were busted by the cops with 3 underage girls in Marin County, and the 3 of them were arrested for contributing to the delinquency of minors, and Miller was charged with marijuana possession. And so even though the charges were later dropped, all this stuff all together at once, just all this stuff in one night is crazy. And I know you have said it was like the bell that signaled us out of the gate was the death knell. To reiterate, this is not a fatal blow. Your debut reached number 24 on Billboard. This is not a fatal blow, but it was not a great omen.
Well, again, that A&R machine, if somebody was imaginative, they could have turned this into rock and roll and not airbrushed anything and not done anything with the flag, but just promoted us like you might have promoted the Rolling Stones. Because we were kind of a bad boy band. And so if you would have taken it from the position of pushing it as a positive for rock and roll, I'm probably off in the woods there.
I don't think so at all. I think you're right on, actually, because maybe you weren't as much the American Beatles, you were the American Stones.
Yeah, we were
right? So
kind of hopefully writing music as interesting as the Beatles and behaving kind of like the Stones.
Look, that was a great summer for music, and your record was riding high qualitatively all the way at the top. I mean, you were all the way at the top.
You can look at it all of a sudden, there was kind of the fiasco, if you look at it that way, for the launch. And then the guys getting caught up with some fans. Those are girls that were, groupies or whatever you want to call them at the time. And nobody was I guess they were underage, but we weren't that much older. Anyway, so that situation caused a scandal. And then all of a sudden, you've got Matthew is probably becoming a bit of an issue with the executives. And there was probably some things behind the scenes. And when we went off on tour with the Mamas and Papas, rock and roll band, we were kind of misbehaving.
11 days after the launch party, you guys are at Monterey, and your set is fucking blazing. I've heard your set 1 million times. It's incredible. Unfortunately, Kate's demanded $1 million from Lou Adler. So because he made that demand, you were placed elsewhere in the schedule. You were supposed to go on Saturday night right before Otis, and they wound up putting you on at sunset on Friday when there was very few people there.
We went from the best position to the worst. We had to open it.
You didn't open it. It was the association opened.
Well, the association opened.
Yeah. Your set was incredible, but you weren't in the movie.
No, we didn't get it filmed. Too bad. That set was fun.
Your set was astounding. It was incredible. So 2 months after the debut was released in August 1967, you guys reconvened with David Rubinson in Hollywood and recorded 4 songs: An Early Bitter Wind, The Place and the Time, He, and Sweet Ride. Only He was wound up used from those sessions. I like all this stuff. I think The Place and the Time wound up better on WoW. I think you guys workshopping it, I like what you guys did with The Place and the Time for WoW. But that little pocket right before you guys relocated, what I read, and I want you to please clarify for me, because this space is a question mark for me, but what I read is that the band were wildly undisciplined and living in a house in Malibu, partying harder and harder with each passing day. And so to protect their investment, and because David Rubinson wanted to be with his family, Columbia demanded that their new record be done in New York. Is that what happened or no?
Well, I don't know what Columbia's motives were, but we lived down in Malibu simply because we needed to write music. We all lived together there. And so we were able to write music in Malibu. And we did do some partying on the beach with some other people that lived in Malibu at the time. It was kind of fun.
So the band was thrown out of hotels all over Manhattan, and Peter quit at one point to tend to his marriage, which was falling apart. So he left 3 unfinished tracks, including Looper. I have a quote from you where you said, there was a schism. At least in California, we were a band. In New York, we'd work with only 1, 2, maybe 3 guys at a time. All the strings and horns on that album were there to make up for the lack of having a band, which, as far as timing goes, is perfect. It's the era of Sgt. Pepper, so strings, horns, all this stuff is allowable, but you're using it as a mask. So Kate's is fired by the band in late 1967. Do you remember what the specific circumstances were? What was the straw that broke the camel's back? And why did you guys eventually wind up firing him?
It just became apparent that Matthew didn't have our best interests at heart.
Was there one incident where you were like, fuck this, we're done?
It's hard to pinpoint any particular incident. Maybe Peter or Bob would be able to point to that. But personally, there just came a point where I knew, I don't know exactly what the point was, but we were all in agreement that he was not a good manager. He was not doing us any favors. He had chopped us up and sliced us up and taken all of our publishing and our royalties. He did everything he possibly could. He would take the advance and be able to, like, again, keep us like, what is it, mushrooms in the dark? Whatever that saying is, keep us in the dark with a lot of manure around us. Again, we had to have our bills paid and all that, but we realized that those were coming from our concerts and we were making money from the concerts, but we were never, he had all of the business end of it. We had nothing. So we had to kind of start over again and just get rid of him. So
you guys fire him. It's the end of 67. At this point forward, any success that you all enjoyed as Moby Grape was always accompanied by legal disputes with Matthew Cates. Yeah. The dispute with him became more acute after the rights to your songs were signed away in 1973 in a settlement that was made without your knowledge. So now we're at phase 2, the darkest of bad vibes, 1967 to 1971. Mid-March 68, the Fake Grape make their first appearance in Seattle. In May, there's a hectic tour. Whoever did your itinerary seriously should be court-martialed. Just a crazy tour. There's no logic. You guys are all over the goddamn place. And it deposits you finally in New York, where Bob starts playing in completely different keys during some gigs, right? I mean, he's basically demonstrating that this is all fucked up by showing you live on stage that he's not into it anymore, right?
Yeah, that was a difficult time.
Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show-per-week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. This episode is brought to you in part by Bespoke LA. Located in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, Bespoke LA is the modern podcaster's dream come true. It's got 2 podcast pods available, one with audio only and the other with both audio and video. Just think, you can start your own podcast tomorrow without investing a single penny in equipment. What, you don't have experience editing? Don't even sweat it. For an additional fee, Bespoke LA can edit your podcast. Or not, it's entirely up to you. Rates start at $75 an hour with discounts if you book 4 sessions at once. go to bespokela.com/podcast. That's BSPOKELA.com/podcast for more information or to book your time today. And be sure to tell them that Dave sent you for a one-time 25% discount.
It was like we had a family thing, it was like a family.
Yeah, and you guys were sitting around in a circle really listening to each other, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's like it was ideal. It's like we just thought maybe we could keep it going for a while or forever. That's what Omaha was about. I'm yours forever. We're going to be here doing this when we're old and gray. It's just that whole thing to have that, come apart was traumatic. It was traumatic, man, because I had found myself in that band. I'm a band guy.
Lads and ladies, he's playing his game, but I guess we're playing it too. It's Peterlewis.
Jeez. Thank you.
Dude, you are the best. First of all, just a little backstory for people listening is that I've been like a mosquito to you for the last couple of months. I've been almost stalking you to make sure that this interview gets done. And I know I've been a little bit annoying. In the meantime, I've talked with Don Stevenson for 6.5 hours. I talked with Bob Mosley for an hour. I've been talking with Cam Cobb pretty much every single day on the phone and reading his Skip book. And I'm about to talk with him for a very long time about Skip. So I'm putting a tremendous amount of time and energy into a Grape series. And I know that you're very smart and aware of cultural touchstones. So I'm sure that you've seen the movie Rashomon.
Well, that's right. It's, like everybody in the band had their own point of view.
Right. So since this is the last interview, I'm going to cut through all the bullshit, like all the setup. We've already done it. I've done it with Don. We know who is in this band. So I want to cut through all the shit and just get straight to the meat of
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I'll forget the backstory then.
I'm just saying, typically the show follows a certain format. I got to ask you, and this is not a typical strain that runs through bands at the time, especially in San Francisco, where there's such a strong, and I want to actually preempt this by saying I've been on antidepressants for a long time. I suffer with depression, and it's a daily thing. I don't know which side of the bed I'm going to wake up on. But is there anyone in Moby Grape who doesn't or hasn't struggled with depression?
Maybe Don and Jerry. They're from the Pacific Northwest, they're pretty hardy.
Yeah. That's honestly, it's a very strong aspect that makes your music so easy for me to connect to, because not only am I hearing this incredibly reflective tone in your music, I hear it course through a lot of your work, but also there's an indomitable spirit where all these objectively terrible things are happening to you guys, and you guys are getting up, brushing yourselves off. And like I told Don, you guys have been in a lot of ways like a lighthouse for me throughout my whole life. Since I discovered you guys in '94, anytime I'm beaten to shit, I can't help but think of you guys and think like, okay, they could do it. They kept going. I can too.
That's the better job than to become a huge rock star. That might have been what redeems us for not being smarter, like we were talking about before.
But also, let's be realistic, though, Peter. In a different world where quantum physics is at play, and June 6th, 1967 goes exactly according to plan, and all 5 singles that are released go top 10. All 5 singles are in the top.
Oh, yeah. We'd have been all dead, just because of the kind of people we were.
Right. And in that world, there's no way, I don't think, that in the 21st century, you would be inspired creatively and still be
I wouldn't. I don't regret that. I don't. No, that's one thing I can say, that I don't regret not becoming a huge rock star. I saw what fame does to people when I was a kid. My parents couldn't stay married. It was a drag.
So going back to the very beginning, Peter and the Wolves falls apart because of the Joel Scott Hill trio kind of absorbing you. And is it you and Mosley meeting each other for the first time? Is that the first great member whose path you crossed?
Yeah, Mosley. Joel Scott Hill had a band called the Joel Scott Hill Trio, which was Joel, Mosley, and Johnny Barbada, who finally was a drummer. He played first with the Turtles and then with Crosby, Stills, and Nash and them guys. He played with Crosby and Nash when they were doing their stuff. And he played with Neil Young. He played with those guys and Jefferson Starship.
Yeah.
Good drummer.
And so it kind of wound up being, when you look at just tracing where all the guys went and what could have happened, because Joel Scott Hill was this close to being in Moby Grape. He kind of decided at the last minute.
Well, he didn't like Matthew Cates. Joel and I wanted to start a band, like that did original songs, because we were playing cover tunes in clubs up and down the coast or whatever. And I met Joel through Lee Michaels. Like I played a certain way. Joel was like Bob, the rhythm and blues guy. But they played Beatles songs and all that. Joel had that hair. He looked like John Lennon,
Yeah.
He was a cool guy, a real hustler kind of guy. So we were going to have a band. And I said, well, we had a drummer, but we didn't have a bass player. And he said, well, I know this guy, Bob Mosley. Joel quit when Lee Michaels joined the band because Bob didn't want to split the money up 4 ways. And Bob's like that, he'll just quit.
Yeah.
He didn't like it.
He almost did it on the way to the Fillmore in 71.
Huh?
On the way to the Fillmore, on the plane ride to the Fillmore, he almost quit Moby Grape to play with Neil Young.
Oh, no, he was going to play with Steven at that point. All those guys wanted Bob.
The legendary story of you meeting Bob for the first time, it honestly sounds like a scene from a movie.
Yeah, it was cool. He was just leaning up against a bar in L.A. airport, and I didn't, I was looking for a hippie, but he had this really cool blonde hair. It was like razor cut, like in Izod shirt and Bermuda shorts, and his bass leaned up against a bar and a goatee, mean looking. And I said, that must be him, So I went up and I said, are you Bob Mosley? He didn't say anything. He just picked up his bass and followed me to the car, and he got in the back seat, and made me chauffeur him into Hollywood. And he asked me, I remember we stopped at a stoplight, and he said, I can sing anything up to high C and play like a motherfucker. He said, what can you do? That was all he said to me. And I said, well, I guess I'll do a little of this. And we got to the practice place, and Joel was waiting for us, and we walked in, and Bob started doing Big Boss Man. He was looking at me, because he thought it was my band, like it was my band. Like Joel told him, yeah, Loretta Young's son wants to have a band, man. You want to be in it? And he said, Bob had grown up in San Diego with they had his dad worked, not his real dad, but his adopted dad. Bob has a story of his own. I mean, you talked to him. Did you talk to him about all this?
Yeah.
Well, Bob's, like they were all, working class people, and so Loretta Young, that was a big deal to Bob, so it was better.
He was actually a fan of your mother's.
Yeah, well, she liked Bob. She didn't like those other guys at all, but she loved Bob, Bob's very endearing when he wants to be. So we got into LA, and you got to the practice place, and Bob's just staring at me going, Big Boss Man, playing like boom 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 boom,
Skip opens the door and grabs you in a bear hug and says, welcome to the promised land.
Oh, it's Skip, yeah. We were practicing down there, and there's this guy. The way we met this guy, my drummer had left Peter and the Wolves to go play with Joel, and at some point when Johnny Barbada left and played with the Turtles. So it's like all musicians were doing this and that in those days. But
actually, your drummer was the one that Cates had known about and reached out to.
Right. Because he had auditioned for the job with the Jefferson Starship, but Spencer Dryden got it, who was also a member of Peter and the Wolves at some point.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we were in this practice session, and there's this guy standing in the corner kind of in the dark, and twisting it. He had a black goatee, his hair is all black shirt, and it kind of looked like the devil, and just twisting his goatee, like scrutinizing everybody. I didn't know who he was. It's just some guy in the room. And we got done. I went home, and I got a call that night, and it was the drummer, and he said, Matthew really dug what we were doing. He wants to see us tomorrow. I said, who's Matthew? He says, he was the Jefferson Airplanes. Man, it was the guy in the room. And I guess the drummer had sort of contacted him or done something. And that's how he got to the practice. And then, so I said, okay, well, we went over there. Joel went over there with me and Bob and the drummer and Matthew. He had this apartment in an apartment building on Sunset, which is pretty cool. In those days, if somebody's got something, they look like they're happening and maybe they can help you.
Right.
And so we went out there and knocked on the door, and he opens the door and he's in this kimono and it's little bikini underpants, no shoes or anything. Just a kimono, short kimono, kind of weird. Now he doesn't have his black turtleneck on anymore. He's got this little kimono and his bikini underpants. And come in. So we go in there and Joel kind of looks at me and we look at Joel and this guy might be. Anyway, so we went in there and I remember this long table he had was just filled with papers, like lawsuit papers and photo shots, of like people that want to be in the music business or want to be acting. It's just like this. It's all real messy. And he's kind of floating around talking about, like being the manager for the Jefferson Airplane. He's got albums. In the meantime, he's all mad at them, We don't know anything about the guy or really who the Jefferson Airplane is because they weren't famous at that point. They had made a record, but they weren't like, the first record they made didn't go national really.
Right.
So we're just sitting there and he gets all through with his spiel and we leave and he asked us if we want to come up to San Francisco and put our band together there. So Joel didn't want to do it because he thought the guy was jive,
Yeah. What was your gut telling you? Do you remember your gut saying this guy's jive? Or were you thinking, this seems like we were just trying to do something. And there was a guy that seemed like he was going to help us. Nobody else was there. It was just fate. Yeah. And to be fair, without Matthew, it might not have happened.
Okay, I admit that.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my take on Matthew was I didn't think he was jive. Joel was real hip about that stuff, about people. But my thing with Joel was, well, so what if you can help us,
Yeah, right.
But Joel wanted to run things. He was the kind of guy.
Yeah.
And he saw Matthew as the guy that was going to challenge him, or I don't know. They didn't like each other.
Have you talked with Joel in the years since about what would have happened if he...
No, I saw Joel one more time, really. I talked to Joel one more time at the Monterey Pop Festival. He came up there, and the night after I took acid, the day after I took acid the first time, I saw Joel in a hotel room with Bob, and it's like, I think he wished he'd joined the band or been in the band. But, like I say, with that stuff, there's just no way back.
Well, at that point, it was like the very beginning of things starting to get fucked up, but you guys were still mostly in a really good place.
Yeah. Yeah, right then we were. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had high hopes that everything was going to work out.
So the band gets named and you guys sign with Matthew. Is it true? I've heard that Neil Young was actually...
Yeah, he was there when we did that, yeah.
And that you said, and I'm wondering if you read into it or if this was really the thing, you said, I think Neil knew even then that this was the end. We had bought it.
Yeah, he was shaking his head, like, don't do it, we were doing a dance with Matthew because, like you'd get up there and there no strings attached, and then Don and Jerry show up, and then we signed these management contracts, and then he saw we getting a little more attention, and you sign your way you're publishing, and then right before the Buffalo Springfield went back to LA and said, you gotta check these guys out, it was like that was when right before we could afford to say no and still stay together. So Matthew, that might have been in his mind when Joel decided he wasn't going to go to San Francisco. He had to seen all this before because he knew when he saw it. We saw one, one of those guys, but we didn't. We wanted to play together, and so we did. Neil Young was upstairs at the Art, this club we had in Sausalito, where we played every night. We were up there, and the Buffalo Springfield would come up there, and we'd play these sets with them, like for a week or two at a time. Neil was up there. I remember him playing his orange country gentleman he had, and we were up there. He was just sitting there. And the rest of us, we had this meeting, and I don't know why he was in the room, but he was. And we were just, Matthew was saying, well, he had to have the name, And Skip was promoting it, saying, well, he just wants not to have to call everybody when he gets an offer.
Right, but also, he was saying to Skip, just like you got thrown out of the airplane, if I control the name, I can protect us.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's what we all, Bob, I remember Bob storming out of the room and saying, and I went after him and saying, no, man, it's cool. And somehow got him back in there, and we ended up signing our name away to him. Of course, right after that, he disappeared. I don't know. It wasn't bad immediately, even after that.
Right.
But when we got to the Monterey Pub Festival, we were doing a sound check, and we heard this arguing going on behind us.
With Lou Adler, right?
Lou Adler, yeah.
Yeah.
And Matthew was saying, yeah, give us $1 million, before I'll let you photograph these guys. So Lou just had us go on first. We were going to play before Jimi Hendrix
Yeah. Well, before we get there, because a lot of stuff happens before there, I got to ask, between Skippy's Corte Madera house on Redwood Avenue or the Ark, when you think back to the beginning of Moby Grape, when things were just perfect and you were just filled with excitement, which of those two places does your mind go first?
Skippy's house, where we used to go upstairs and practice, just work. It was a little hot up there, but we were just really, like up there playing our music, trying to work our music out in a little room, and then go play at the Fillmore, and
they were like babies crawling around.
It was like we had a family thing. It was like a family.
Yeah. And you guys were sitting around in a circle, really listening to each other, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's like it was ideal. It's like we just thought maybe we could keep it going for a while or forever. That's what Omaha was about. I'm yours forever. We're going to be here doing this when we're old and gray. It's just that whole thing, to have that, come apart was traumatic. It was traumatic, man, because I had found myself in that band. I'm a band guy.
Yeah.
I like being in a band with my brothers. I always wanted a real, my family it was weird. It was like, it wasn't like my mother was like doing her thing. And then my dad would take me and my brother on rides and do whatever we did with him. But it wasn't a family thing,
I really get it. Just reading about Corte Madera and the Ark, I get excited. Like I feel like I'm there. And, if I can just read words that convey the experience and you're it, I can understand spending the rest of my life chasing that feeling.
Well, it's having had the experience that you chase. The dream was not to become rock stars, though. It was to sort of turn music into a religion up there. It was like a dream we share with other bands in San Francisco. See, the Monterey Pop Festival changed everything. It made it all about becoming rock stars and getting rich. And in a way, that was kind of sacrilegious, what happened there. And I would say that to Grace and the rest. Grace wouldn't care. She just has this attitude. But I know that Paul Cantor in particular kind of had these high hopes, and Sam Andrew, all of them.
Sam Andrew told you guys are better than the Beatles. So tell me how exciting it is to not only have multiple record companies coming after you, Atlantic, Elektra, Columbia, but Elektra actually offering you guys 50% of company stock to sign with them. What is that feeling like? And
it was sort of ridiculous, I mean, there was a ridiculous part of it. I didn't get it.
You weren't excited?
You have to see that you've been on there. Like you were talking about battling depression. There's definitely times when you're right there where for maybe a minute, there's a thing where you're the guy, everybody, you're the newest, coolest thing. Moby Grape had that experience. And I think, as long as you're there, you can sort of do anything and get away with it kind of thing. You're free. It's sort of feeling of being free of what, judgment or something.
The day that I spent at your house with Casey Dolan, and we were talking, this is maybe 17 years ago or 16 years ago. And we were talking about, at that time, Casey and I writing a book. This is before Cam was on the scene. And I thought the perfect title would be Grape Expectations. And the reason is because all the times that you guys wound up coming back to reunite over the years from 1971 onwards, you had the specter of early 1967 hanging over your head of the buzz that was a legitimate buzz that was created. It had to have set off some kind of...
The thing is, like, when Skip, it came apart, the whole thing of one for all for one, was gone at a certain point. And if you're asking me at what point that was gone, I couldn't tell you. You know, it had to do with too many ghouls getting through the gate.
Yeah.
But letting too many people get between us, you know. One thing Linda told me about the Beatles, though, right when I first met her, was that, you know, if you're talking, if you're in a room with just three of them, you know, they're just like people, right? You know, just talking to somebody, you know. But when the fourth Beatle comes in there, it's the Beatles, you know, and nobody gets in there.
Right.
So they had, that's what we were stupid, is because we didn't do that. We didn't have that thing where it was like we all got distracted by, you know, everybody's trying to get in there. Everybody's trying to, in a way in life, and it's not bad or good. It's just a kind of natural human nature thing where if you're trying to do something, there's always something trying to stop you.
Right.
Somebody will try to stop you.
But you honestly cannot be blamed for that, because the Beatles had Hamburg. They had their childhood years. You guys were...
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. But that, you know, being as it may, you know, like our challenge was to not have been in Hamburg and doing all that and done all that, and still have been able to keep the ghouls from coming through the gate. The way I look at it now is like trying to explain why things happen the way they did without making a judgment about them, you know, like,
yeah,
because I don't feel like it should have been anything else but what it was. I mean, I get like everybody does, where you just would like things to be better in your life or less complicated or something. But that's about it. I mean, as far as I couldn't have dealt with the success that Neil Young got, you know, I mean, I don't see myself, and he might say, well, sure you could, you know, because, you know, you would have gotten, it would have been, take it as it came, you know, like just take it easy, you know, and you would have been able to do that. But I don't know. I mean, the way it would have acted on me in terms of its effect upon my ego would have made me a complete asshole.
Maybe.
I think so. I mean, I know me.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I know me, you know, and it's like, I had seen that already.
In all fairness, if John Lennon had been sent to the Tombs and Brian Epstein screwed the Beatles on their contracts, you know, those guys would have, you know, had fragmentation as well.
Well, that's right. You know, you can have a support group to help you. But it's all about, you know, there's these things we all got to deal with in life. And I think, but in the end, you know, the idea is to sort of get off of the ego trip.
The image that has really hung with me, and I'm finding it hard to shake, and we'll work our way backward from this, but after you recorded and then mixed the debut record, you and Skip fly home. I read this thing where you were very subdued. It was I'm reading now, it was as if we were both unsure about how to sustain the great outpouring of energy it took to make that record, and in some way knew the apex of our Moby Grape experience was already over. Yeah,
right. It was.
That's an interesting vibe. Do you think that Skip was feeling that along with you?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Skip was, you know, it was like we were all sort of like on a search for ourselves, you know, like, and the Moby Grape experience we had before we got that first album made was part of that search. You know, it's like we were sharing that together. But I think afterwards, it was like more of a personal thing, you know. But the band had already got famous enough to get enough attention to keep us from just going our separate ways. And that's really what happened. It's people's awareness of you, you know, that keeps you in character.
Yeah.
You know?
You've also said that the actual making of your debut record still is and most likely always will be the highlight of my life in music. But on that plane ride home with Skip, wasn't there a part of you that was also feeling that if we did it once, we can just do it again and again? Or did you not feel that way?
No, it was more of a feeling about what was going on between the band members, you know, like the interpersonal, the way we interacted. Before that, we were sort of on this hyper, you know, we were all kind of trying to hyper activate ourselves to get through something, you know, and you can't sustain that, you know, that at some point it just, I don't know, you know, your past catches you or something.
Is that one of the things that tripped up Skippy, having to be that?
I don't know. I mean, but got Skip is like being too, we had to go to New York to do our second record because we, I don't know, didn't come up with anything when we were supposed to. And Columbia wanted another record before we just completely self-destructed. They got sort of a wake-up call when we got busted after our press party for being on this fire road with these underage chicks. So we were getting all kinds of letters from their legal department. You got to not do that. And somehow, they could have used it for a publicity campaign and got it, for Christ's sake, Columbia, they were caught between wanting to be the hip label to be with because they had the Byrds and they had us. And then, like being the Mitch Miller and, Doris Day and Johnny Mathis and all that and all them, But, they were running the company, was run by the Doris Days and the company. We were sort of like the edging out into the cooler, having a cooler image.
Yeah, you were like, kind of like the Stones. I mean, the Stones were going through drug busts. They were going through all kinds of crazy shit, and they were fine. Yeah. Well,
I mean, just like I say, it's all about, whether or not, I don't know why we were choosing that album cover with Don flipping off the world in front of that thing. It's like when people see that, they figure you're going to be these rebellious, it's not just playing music. You're just out to kick ass and take names, and you got the American flag behind you, like you're going to change this country into a place where, the hippies get treated with some respect. It was like we didn't have any choice about that either. Columbia made that decision. And then all you're trying to do is play a role, like playing a role in a movie, and the real world, of course, gets you into all kinds of trouble, because nobody really liked all that, right? I mean, the half of the country didn't like hippies back then.
But I mean, if you didn't show somebody the cover and you just put that record on.
Yeah. They might have liked it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm saying it doesn't work like that way. It's like, I mean, they sell an image, a thing. And then, if you can keep it in perspective, keep the controlled folly in play. Yeah. You can go out there and play your music and put it back in your hip pocket when the gig's over, Well, you ask what happened to Skip. Skip took it seriously because he was not an actor. He was like this guy in a search for who Skip was. And on the album cover, he's got the American flag and we're all going to, and Don flipping the world off, so we're coming after you. He got in New York when we got back there. I think, he just was too lonely, got with the wrong people, took the wrong drugs, and thought he was Alexander the Great, and his girlfriend was Cleopatra, and they were going to take over. Really take over. Like I had to put him away for 6 months.
And of course, you're not there at this time. You're, back.
No, I was trying to get Terry Melcher to do the second record because I hated the way Rubinson was like. We did have this good track on The Bitter Wind. It was really nice. And we'd worked in there and not come up with shit. And then we had this nice track. It was really a good track. And all of a sudden, he puts all this crap, this weird sounds and stuff supposed to be like somebody freaking out. It didn't belong. And what the hell's that got to do with the song, And like, it was just it was the way he was producing it, just the guitar sounds, the whole thing. It was like, it just wasn't a rock thing. Moby Grape at his best was a really good rock band.
I know we're leaping from album 1 to album 2, but I am curious, there's something about WOW that's always been very intriguing to me. Now, I'm going to be honest, I really am not a fan at all of Grape Jam.
Well, I'm just talking about what I did at the time. Maybe if I listen to WOW now, I wouldn't mind all that shit so much, but it's like, I'm just trying to think about how to get some songs on the charts. And I don't think WOW is a way to do it.
No, of course not. No one is going to argue that those songs are going to get you.
I mean, I like The Bitter Wind before Rubinson fucked it up.
I got to tell you, I prefer it after, and I'm the only one who feels that way, and so be it. But, the thing that you guys were doing with WOW was almost like using this sort of Sgt. Pepper kitchen sink production style to cover up the fact that nobody was in the studio with anyone else at the same time.
Yeah, well, that was part of, well, we were, yeah, that's right. I mean, the band was coming apart.
Yeah.
Same thing was true for the Buffalo Springfield, too, I would say that.
Right.
You know, when they did their second record, you know, there was Expecting to Fly and all that, but those songs were not done. I think, I don't know who produced that, Jack Nietzsche or something.
I got to ask, is every single song that you wrote during the first 4 albums of Moby Grape about your splintering marriage with Diane?
Sort of, I guess so. You know?
Except for he.
Except for he. Yeah, well, he was like when I first took acid, you know, I just didn't, it wasn't me anymore, but I was still here.
But Sitting by the Window is about Diane, right?
Sitting by the Window was not about her, because at that point, we were sort of not happily married, because she was angry at me for just slipping around on her all the time, which I was just, you know, I don't know I can't excuse myself. I wouldn't have done it if I had it to do over, but what can I say? It's like, that was my one chance to be free kind of thing.
Right.
And here she was wanting me to be her boyfriend, you know what I mean? Sort of, that's a sense I had about what was going on with Diana, you know? And so Sitting by the Window was just a song I wrote. It was more of a prophetic thing where it's like a year later, yeah, that's what was happening. Maybe that's what happens when you write a song like that and put it out there, and then it actually happens. It's all self-fulfilling prophecy.
Weren't you at Mosley's apartment and you were looking out the window while it was raining?
Yeah. You know, it was after a gig, I remember, when it was at night and we were there. And I used to go over to his place. Me and him would just sit there. And we were playing, and, you know, it just came out between us, kind of, you know, and it just happened. It was one of those songs that just falls out of the sky. Kind of thing.
Talk about a great song. Jesus Christ. There's no time that I've ever heard that song, in the hundreds of times that I've heard it, where it didn't strike me as brilliant and almost painfully moving. Talk to me about your relationship with that first record. What does that record mean to you in 2025?
It's just what it is, you know. It's like carved in stone kind of thing, you know, like there's no way you could change it. It couldn't be any better to me. There's other records he made that could have been better, but not that one. That's all I'd say about it. All the songs and everything on it, you know.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And also the type of band that you were, you're different on this record than you guys would ever be again.
Because Moby Grape was really more than just a thing. It was more...
It feels like an autobiography.
A whole life thing, you know, where you watch these guys go through all of this. What happens to these guys? I mean, what's going to happen to these guys that did that?
You guys are very honest. It's my favorite thing about you guys as a group. You know, Moby Grape 69, having Seeing on that record is the story of what happened with Skip. And, you know, having He on Wow and having The Place and the Time on Wow is, you know, a State of the Union on what's going on in New York.
That's right. Yeah, there was a description of what we were going through. You know, it's like, so in that sense, yeah, it was histrionic or autobiographical, you know, and if you cared about us, then like Robert Plant's favorite album is 20 Granite Creek. Yeah, as weird as that sounds, you know, like he says, well, hey, you know, I don't know why, because it's like he liked us that much, you know, as people. It's just, how can those guys do that, you know? And then what's going to happen to them? Right. And then he sort of listens to that and goes, okay, you know, I say, you can hear the struggling. This is what I like about Moby Grape. You can hear the struggles.
Let's go back to the first one. We're understandably leaping around out of excitement, but that first record is a masterpiece on pretty much every single list of the greatest albums of all time and the greatest debuts of all time. It's high up on both lists. And this is 5 stars out of 5. Would you give that 5 stars?
I guess, yeah. You know. All I know is that I wouldn't change it.
And then here's why I asked you about whether or not you believed in luck, good luck or bad luck, because you guys have nothing but good luck. If you want to believe in good luck, you have nothing but terrific serendipity occurring to you as a band up until June 6th, 1967. The day that the album comes out, I'm sure your set at that party was amazing. But, you know, the hippies at that time, they are kind of snooty, so they see good marketing.
Oh, yeah.
The Columbia marketing department.
Yeah, it was terrible. That was a stupid idea.
You know, they were excited and getting behind behind you guys.
Yeah, but they should have let us just take our chances with everybody else out there. You know, like we would have risen to the top at some point if that's where we belong, or we would have found some place to be where we could have been more a part of the scene instead of trying to turn us into some kind of pop thing, you know, or because we were all good looking. And, you know, it was like that kind of thing that I did, like turn us into Paul Revere and the Raiders or some shit.
Right.
Which is what they did. I mean, I was in Clive Davis's office when he decided to do that, you know. I mean, it was like, what? You know, and they did. You know, I remember them asking us what we thought, and Skippy was there too. I don't know. It was when we were back there mixing it. I don't want to take it wasn't my idea.
Yeah,
you know.
But at that night, I'm sure you weren't thinking, "Oh, this is fucked up." I'm sure it was just another gig at the Avalon, right?
Do what now?
I mean, that night. Wasn't it just another gig at the Avalon? Wasn't it only with the benefit of hindsight that you said, oh, that was messed up? Not only did they release 5 singles at once, but, you know, there's 700 bottles of Moby Grape wine and no...
Yeah, the whole thing was jive. You know, it wasn't 60-ish.
Right,
at
right.
all. It was like there was this thing going on in the subculture that was a total violation of, you know, we're, like I say, the San Francisco music scene before Monterey Pop. When Clive Davis went to Monterey Pop, after he went to Monterey Pop, sat there and watched Janis. I mean, he signed everybody with a fringed jacket on afterwards, you know? I mean, it's like, that's how that guy thought. I don't know. I mean, it's like, you know, I'm not a huge fan of his, but I don't want, if he's out there listening, you know, I'm sorry, but you know, I just it wasn't cool.
Yeah.
All right. You know, I mean, it just wasn't cool. There was something going on. There was a more sociological. Columbia doesn't give a shit about that. They just want to sell plastic.
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, that's what they're trying to do, and they're using us to do it. I kind of felt like it was too late after they made those decisions to stop him.
But they didn't talk with you about the release of 5 songs at once.
Yeah, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, they should have done Omaha and 805.
Yeah,
that would have been fine.
Yeah,
you know,
that's perfect.
Like just release Mr. Tambourine Man and feel a whole lot better, you know.
Yeah,
for the Birds, and then let other people discover how cool all their music is.
Exactly.
That's what Moby Grape was trying to do. And then, you know, here they are trying to up themselves, you know, like they do in New York, you know, always trying to do them one better.
So the arrest happens that night, and then 11 days later is Monterey Pop, and Kate's getting into an argument with Lou Adler, and then you guys not being filmed except for the...
Well, they did film it. They got the film. They got filmed the whole thing. They've got the film. You know, I don't know why we haven't seen it now.
Just not included. I mean, I've seen Hey.
It wasn't included in the movie, which is why we didn't get to be stars. Okay, well, that was great. But we fired Kate's that night and started the 40-year-long lawsuit that just ended. We were old men and couldn't go out there and make hay while the sun shined anymore.
Right.
So enough of that, you know, I mean, that's sort of history.
All right, so moving forward, in late summer, in August of 67, you guys reconvene in Hollywood and record 4 songs. This is the first time you were in a studio since April, and you guys lay down Sweet Ride, Bitter Wind, The Place and the Time, and He.
Yeah, but they were all demos.
Isn't He, wasn't that actually used on Wow, though?
Yeah, but I don't know what we did in L.A. was. I remember singing that again when we were in New York and maybe playing it again.
Okay.
I don't know, you know, and the Bitter Wind was all recorded back in New York.
So
the Bitter Wind you hear on Wow was recorded in New York.
A lot of this stuff that goes down over the next few months.
I mean, here's the Place and the Time is a good song, right?
I love that song.
I know, but it's like there would have been a way to make it really good if you'd have let Bob sing certain parts of it. He can sell you anything, like, you know, he has such a good voice. He could have gotten the idea of, you know, when Don and Jerry start the song, it's okay, but there's a point at which Bob should have taken over. Because it all goes to pieces when at some point, it sounds like it's out of tune a little. Maybe it doesn't matter to some people. But I mean, if you're trying to make a song people are going to listen to, it has to all be in tune. It has to all be like all the sections have to be completely baked. and musically too, where you got people, all the band members playing on all the songs, and they all figure out what to play to make them sound cool. I mean, at that point, and wow, nobody cared whether anybody played on their tunes or not.
Talk to me about, if you can, about Skip writing this really serious material, like You Can Do Anything and Seeing. And then
You Can Do Anything was cool, but it was just You Can Do Anything you want to. La, 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 la. Well, that's not it,
What I'm saying is he goes from that to all of a sudden doing kind of his twist on novelty songs, doing funky tonk, just like Gene Autry, and, all the motorcycle sound effects on
Motorcycle Irene was genius.
I love that song.
Yeah, genius.
But I love all his songs on WoW. But
just like Gene Autry is like Skip could get like that.
Wasn't it a tip of the hat to his dad?
His dad?
His dad was doing music like that.
Maybe his dad.
Yeah, his dad was doing.
There was a whimsical part of Skip,
Did he talk with you about deciding that he's going to take things in a purely whimsical direction for a little while?
No, he didn't talk about anything like that to anybody. He just did it,
Okay. Now, most of the making of WoW, are you on the West Coast? Because I know you left at one.
No. I just went there for maybe a few days to try to get Terry, but right when I was in the studio with Terry, I got a phone call from Bob, and he was like, Skip flipped out. It's all over or something. And I had to go. I went back, finished the record.
Did you go to L.A., to work on your marriage or to meet with Terry?
No, I went to talk. I had my girlfriend, I was a terrible guy, but I had gotten involved with this chick that booked a whiskey, whose name was Ronnie Heron. Ronnie, she managed the Doors for a while, and Arthur Lee was, like Help Love, and she knew everybody in the business, right? I just was not happy with what was going on with WoW, so I flew back to LA and got Ronnie to take me to the studio where Terry was producing some chick. And I remember we went in there, and Candy Bergen was in there with him, who I had dated. So I knew them both. I kind of knew Terry. Terry knew who I was, of course, and everything. But it's just this weird scene.
Did you know that Skip was, I'm guessing, his drug intake?
I didn't know there was anything wrong with Skip right then.
Okay.
I knew that he was lonely. I remember him crying, just tears coming out of his eyes in the studio one time, after he played a song and nobody liked it. It was really sad. Linda Eastman was sitting there too. I mean, it was.
What song was he playing? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was You Can Do Anything.
And people didn't like it?
I don't know if that was it, or they just weren't responding to it, or he expected you to jump up and down and, oh yeah, this is it. He thought, he had found the primer for WoW, like the one that was going to start the whole thing off again, and make us, get us the attention we wanted,
So is it a chicken or the egg situation with Skip in terms of the mental illness that wound up coming into play in June? Did this come out of nowhere because of drugs, or was it already in play when? Oh,
yeah. Well, there was always something about Skip, but, like he wasn't, like I say, a guy that you could sit down and talk to, He was never like that. He was just always he's sort of always on a high. And when he wasn't, deeply reflective to the point of with being withdrawn, but he didn't talk about it. He really believed that somehow in the subculture, he sort of saw himself as a leader of some kind in that, or some kind of I would say a messiah, the rock messiah kind of thing,
He has aspects of that for sure. I mean, when I hear the song Seeing.
Oh, Seeing, yeah.
I mean, I can't point to anything else that feels as, it's like
prophetic. But everything he wrote was prophetic. It all happened, That's what I'm saying. Omaha happened, Seeing happened, all of it did.
Everything is like a laser that cuts through all the bullshit in the world.
Then I heard I heard it after. I remember picking Skip up in San Jose and taking him to L.A. He was trying to get him back in the band, But it's like I say, I wasn't there when he actually went nuts and the cops had to take him away. So I didn't see the violence and the crazy, but I heard about it.
Did Don call you and tell you about Joanna?
No.
You didn't know anything about Joanna, the woman he was living with?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So WoW comes out in April of 68. What are your feelings on WoW? Do you like WoW looking back?
No, I mean, I don't, not really. I mean, I like some stuff on it.
I love WoW. I'm telling you that right now.
Okay, well, that's okay. I don't want to put you on a bummer about it.
No, not at all. I don't care if you give it 0 stars. Your truth means way more to me than any kind of.
Well, if you liked Moby Grape enough to be interested in the people, then you would probably think WoW was interesting because those poor guys or something. There was a part of WoW that's sort of symbolic in terms of what was going on in the subculture. Like Moby Grape never got out of the subculture, got to be rock stars with their houses on the hill. So they're writing songs like they're still down there with everybody else trying to struggle through those years where nobody had any money and it was becoming more and more of an issue until here comes Reagan, where, okay, you're either with us or, you either got enough to be part of our trip, the conservative yuppie thing or not. But it was like we were never part of that, Moby Grape, whatever it was or wasn't, it was not a yacht rock band. We were always struggling to, you can hear us trying to be part of that, like I say, that Help Me Do It Kate's kind of sounds like that. But most of it is just like you say, it's pretty honest. We're down here and, we're going to keep trying, if I don't get to, my baby will. It's like I'm trying to be a Dylan character. I think that's what I'm talking about, is trying to keep that fire burning, because it was going out.
But I mean, what I love about WoW is this is like the anti-self-titled record. It couldn't be any more different. It's the flip side. It's like the dark underside of the hippie dream is all laid out in WoW.
Whether by accident or not, I'm saying we were never not part of the subculture.
Right.
That started in the 60s, that it looked like it was going to maybe change the world for a minute, and then it didn't. For whatever reason, man, like the drugs, you can blame whatever you want, but it didn't change the world. And we were still in there thinking there's going to be a better day coming if you just don't stop trying, And it became like a thing that you just do, you sort of turn that into there's no hope, but you're still going to keep trying type thing. And I think when you listen to the music, that's a sense that you get from it. But in a funny way, it sort of teaches you how, if you really think about it, you have to go pretty deep, in terms of, you have to imagine this a little. But I think, it all happens because you have faith in it. That's like faith is what makes things the way they are. Reasons don't factor into the way things change in the universe. The universe responds to faith, intent, that force, that it's like your consciousness is what makes it true. If you weren't aware of it, wouldn't be there kind of thing.
So I got to tell you, out of 5 stars, I give WoW 4.5. I think it's a brilliant record. I think there's a truth to it that is unavoidable. And it's a scary record. It's a dark record.
Yeah.
The darkness is unavoidable in it. You can really hear it right up close in some songs like Rose-Colored Eyes, even in just like Gene Autry, A Foxtrot. But
I know. His thing like that was creepy.
It's creepy. It's funny, but it's very dark and creepy. There's a weirdness to it that is like very hard to put your finger on. So it just hovers there and fucks with you. At least it has for me for decades now. But the best song on the album is He. It's always been one of my favorite songs you've ever written. And as far as, the production touches that a lot of the record is hiding behind, the string arrangement on this is stunning. It's so gorgeous. It doesn't feel like strange.
I finally learned how to play that on my guitar, that with the string section, the New York Philharmonic string section played on that. I now play it on the guitar, so when I do it in person, I play that. It's kind of a classical thing. It's very cool. That was good. Like I like that. I like certain things I did like there because that was a good idea. Rubinson, not that he thought it up himself, this guy Joel Scott wrote that, but at least he knew to get to do it.
Yeah.
No, I like David, man. It's just that he did some weird shit later on, and but if I were in his shoes, I'd have probably done the same thing.
You experienced Skippy's breakdown from the other side of the country. So what's going on with you when you're hearing about this? Are you figuring
I
that
was hanging out with Terry Melcher, and Candace Bergen. When I got the phone call, was in the studio. They called me a Studio D, where we made our first record. He was in there producing Pamela Poland. I remember it was kind of a girlfriend of Skip's for a second. She was a good singer and had some songs, and he was in there producing her. I got there with Ronnie, and Candy was with her at her head on the console. I don't know. She wasn't a druggie. I don't know what was going on with those two, actually, really. But, I dated her and she said, "Oh, Peter," put her head back, went back to sleep. And we were just listening to Pamela sing out there. And then the session was over. And I said, "I want you to produce Moby Grape," He said, "Oh, I'd be glad to. But the whole band has to want to do that, not just you." And then here's the phone rings, and Terry picks it up and says, "Hey, it's for you." And I don't know how they found me there or how, what was going on. All of it just kind of, I was going through all of this kind of, in a half dream. That's how it felt, right then. And it was Bob, and he said, Skip flipped out, and then, the cops got him, and they took him to jail. He went to the prison ward at Bellevue, where they kept him for 6 months. Yeah. That's where he wrote all the songs. And wow, if you're talking about wow, you got to include "or." Right.
Well, that came a little bit after, because
we'll finish with this. Okay. After all that, we had houses in Boulder Creek by then. Right. And Skip had one, but he sold it, and something happened to it. He was in San Jose with his wife, who had been, having an affair with the road manager while he was back in Bellevue. So he was all pissed off, and he knew about that. But he knew that before, I guess, and he had written a song, about that. And one of it was on "or," down by the river, waited down by the river, wait for you to come. For this roadie. He was building him a coffin, and, the story as the story goes. But anyway, so I went to find...
Is that not Tim? She was having an affair. Pat was having an affair with Tim?
Yeah. Okay. For the roadie. Yeah, going to build him a coffin. He was in San Jose with his old lady, and I went and I got him, and he was like... I hadn't seen him since New York, since then. It was like a year maybe, or maybe not even that, but I got him, and it was a different guy, totally different, real intent, and he had this headband on, and we got on the plane, and, I looked over, and he was just sitting in there, just tense, as like he could exploded. And he'd sweat popping out on his forehead. And we got to L.A., got in a rent-a-car, went to a record store. It was the day Neil Young's first record came out, first solo record, and "or" at the same day.
Right.
We went in the store and got the 2 records and played Neil's first, and then put Skip's on. When I heard Skip's record, the hair on the back of my head stood up, and I just thought, oh, man. And all those songs, like Little Hands, War and Peace, they were just like, they were all like written in that place where I would have been curled up in the fetal position, and he was like documenting it in these fucking songs. I mean, you talk about scary. That record was scary.
That day you went there was mid-May 1969, because 8 days after that meeting, you flew to Tennessee to make Truly Fine Citizen.
Yeah.
In addition to Skip having the incident that led him to Bellevue, 3 months prior to that, the Fake Grape make their first appearance in Seattle. So did you feel like the band is done? Because like you said, too many ghouls in the door. The Fake Grape, along with, how do you even get over a hurdle like that?
Well, it's like we had the kind of a thing of just the momentum, so it carries you through it. I mean, you might go through it like a ship goes, you're going down a river and you hit the rapids, you're kind of not in control totally, but the river's going to keep taking you down, and that's kind of the way it felt. You just hung in there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we've done ever since. I just said there's a point at which you got to get back in control of it, control of your journey. That's all. You get behind the curve, and you can't, like in flying, it's they call getting behind the curve. When you get going too slow, when you're landing, and especially in a plane like a jet, when you pull off the power, the nose goes up, which is bad because that means, that no matter how much power you add, you can't put the nose down. And the only way to go faster is to put the nose down. You don't add power to go faster in a plane. You put the nose down. If you want to go higher, you put more power on it, keep the nose where it's at,
Right.
I mean, it's in a jet, when the tail goes down like that, when you're landing, you get behind what's called the power curve, and you go in tail first, and that's what you don't want to do. I think Moby Grape, was always like, just it got behind the power curve a little, there too much. You get going too low and slow, you're just going down. You're not going to go up anymore, You got to control the landing.
All right, that about does it. Stay tuned, because next week brings upon us a brand new episode in the Grape Expectations Series. It's Don Stevenson Part 2, in which we explore what it's like to stay in a band after the band leader himself tries to kill you with a fire axe and is sent to a mental institution. For most bands, that'd be enough to break them, but for Moby Grape, that's what they call Monday. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, the major tier gets a very special treat. And man, do I mean special. Monday's bonus episode is part 2 of an incredibly revealing 6-part interview with Moby Grape and skipspence biographer Cam Cobb, in which we focus on Skip's time in the Grape right up until he hunts down Don with a fire axe. There will be a very short sneak peek running publicly for free on Monday morning, but the entirety of the show will only be accessible on the major tier of our Patreon. Don't miss it, or you'll only be getting part of the story. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier gets their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of Part 2 of Moby Grape's Don Stevenson. It's the episode as it was truly intended to be heard, with all the essentials left intact. And then come Friday, everyone else gets to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Don Stevenson, peterlewis, Cam Cobb, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into the classic rock and roll from the 1960s is to go to the Beach Boys Season 1, Catch a Wave, 1961 to 1964, from episode 189 on, the Righteous Brothers Bill Medley interview, that's 181 and 182, my interview with the Free Design, that's 160 to 162, my epic interview with the Mamas and Papas Michelle Phillips, that's 141 to 159, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that's 137, my 12-hour interview with Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from the Association, that's 109 to 113, Vashti Bunyan reading her entire output, that's 103 to 104. Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes, that's 86 and 87. Bert Summer, that's 83 and 84. Sweetwater is episode 79. A tribute to David Crosby, 77 and 78. Andrew Tuttle rates the Monks, 74. Jim Florentine on Black Sabbath is 64 to 68. Lou Barlow on the Zombies is 59 and 60. Marvin Gaye biographer David Ritz rates Marvin Gaye, that's 45 to 47. Blind Faith is 43. Anthony Fantano rates the Velvet Underground as 32 and 33. Bob Forrest rates the band as 25 and 27. Monkees manager Andrew Sandoval rates the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. Don Randy rates David Axelrod as 17. Badfinger is 16. The Bee Gees is 10 and 11. Sly and the Family Stone is 5, 6, and 7. And Pink Floyd is 1 and 2. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, June 6th, we're coming at you with the next installment of Grape Expectations. It's Don Stevenson Part 2. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti.